Today it is widely accepted in biblical scholarship that the Gospel according to John was composed towards the close of the 1st century AD, roughly around the year 100. This would mean about 70 years after Jesus had left the scene. And in the meantime, the Gospel according to John went through several stages of development to reach its final form. Now, you will notice that chapter 21, for example, in the Gospel according to John, is marked off in some Bibles as an epilogue. Why is that? Because chapter 20 seems to have marked originally the end of this Gospel, where John says, I could write much more, but I wrote this much and this is sufficient, basically. Because if I were to write everything, the world would not hold the books. It seems that he intended to end his gospel right there, and then suddenly we find chapter 21. Most biblical scholars today would agree that chapter 21, though present in all of the manuscripts of John's gospel available to us, nevertheless came to be tacked on during the last stage of editing of this gospel. But it's not only chapter 21. More to our point now is chapters 15 to 17. Scholars have noted that chapters 15 to 17 has been inserted as a block between chapters 14 and 18. There are several reasons that led to this conclusion. At the end of chapter 14, Jesus anticipates that those who are about to arrest him are drawing close. So Jesus brings his speech to a close by saying, I shall no longer speak much with you, for the prince of the world is coming. And then he says, get up, let us leave here and be on our way. That's John chapter 14, verses number 30 to 31. Now, this continues smoothly if we read on, where it says, after this discourse, Jesus went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley to where there was a garden. The flow of the narrative is smooth. Jesus said he will not speak much more, and he doesn't. He said, get up and let's leave, and he left. He said, let us be on our way, and he's on his way. He's on his way across the Kidron Valley. The problem is that in order to achieve this neat continuation, we had to skip 3 chapters. We jumped from the end of chapter 14 to the beginning of chapter 18. This indicates that the chapters between chapters 14 and 18 have been squeezed in, pushing these two apart. The 3 inserted chapters are filled with the speech of Jesus, making it the longest speech anywhere in the Gospels. And it now sits right after Jesus' declaration, I shall no longer speak much with you. So Jesus is at dinner with his disciples and he says, I shall no longer speak much with you. Get up, let's be going, let's leave here. And then the next chapter, he's still speaking. The following one, he's still speaking. The following one, he's still speaking. 3 whole chapters. It's almost like the dinner guest who says, I've got to leave, and he's just talking by the door. Scholars have noticed then that these chapters obviously are an insertion. Some early manuscripts do not have the word much here, where it says, I will not speak to you much more to you. And that initially, the passage said, I shall no longer speak with you. But Raymond Brown thinks that a later scribe, noticing the difficulty, that Jesus says, I shall no longer speak with you, and then suddenly he's speaking for 3 more chapters, inserted the word much. So that blunts the edge of the difficulty. So I won't speak much more with you. 3 chapters seems like not too much, at least for the scribe. Now, a clearer indication that this section is a later insertion into this gospel would be found by noticing a contradiction between chapters 13 and 16. In chapter 13, verse number 36, Peter asked Jesus where he is going. But then in chapter 16, verse number 5, Jesus complains that none of his disciples are asking him where he is going. And that's in the very same sitting, if we take all of these passages as a smooth continuation. But if we understand then that these 3 chapters were inserted into the Gospel of John after an initial completion of the Gospel, then we understand that the contradiction came there due to this insertion. One author wrote one thing, another author brought something else in there.